We'd like to welcome each and every individual to Voices of Integrity for Business Owners, cloning myself. Now, this is what's interesting about this particular podcast is this is not just for business people. So if you're a business person, which you probably are, business owner, share this with other people. I remember once, with 7 kids, always trying to figure out how to be a better dad, always trying to figure out how to be, better understand my kids and everything. And I remember once Cynthia Tobias, she's the one that introduced me to the 4 learning modalities, the 3 visual, verbal, kinesthetic learning modalities. And she said, I think a lot of times parents don't like, what's the purpose? What's the goal? I think the same thing is true for business owners. Another, author, I don't know who this woman was, but she went ahead and said, what's the number one responsibility for a parent in raising children? And then there was a commercial break, and I'm like, really? And I'm listening, and I couldn't figure out. I'm like, I don't know, it could be this or this. And she said, train your children how to think, not how you think, how to think. And I think that's what cloning oneself is all about, is training somebody how to think, not how you think, but how to think. This one is cloning yourself based on different personality styles. Now, with the different personalities, let me go back to this one here. And so with the different personalities, it's going to be important to look at your personality and the personality of the person what you're cloning. So hopefully you've been through, you're somewhat familiar with the 4 learning modalities. That helps. If you haven't, go through this podcast and then go through another one. Okay, so there's 4 levels of learning. And so there's unconscious incompetence, where we're stupid and we don't know we're stupid. So no learning can occur there. There's a conscious incompetence where we're stupid and we know we're stupid. That's where learning can occur. Then we have a conscious competence where we're really good at something and we know why we're good at it. And then there's the highest level of productivity, which is unconscious competence, where we're really good at it, we don't even know it. So most business owners, as we talked about in previous podcasts, are going to be unconsciously competent, which means it's hard to clone you because you don't understand your own strengths. So for example, I'm going to be a driver personality analytic. I'm going to be a driver analytic. So one of the things that I'm going to be unconsciously competent about is drive, organization, follow through. So those are going to be things that I'm naturally good at. So when I try to clone myself to somebody else, I'm going to just think that they're as driven as I am, they're as disciplined as I am, they're as organized as I am. So I'm not going to train those things, but it's not going to work. It's not going to work because they don't have those skills. So real quick overview, if you're an amiable business owner, your super skills, your superpowers are going to be, people are going to think that you're caring. And people are going to think that you're a nice person, and people are going to think that you're a good listener, and people are going to think a lot of things about you. That gives you the ability to do things that the other 3 personalities, are not able to do. So when you're teaching a driver, you have to teach them how to either care about people or give the impression that you care about people. That's kind of weird to say, but anyways, we might get into that when we start talking further. The analytic, what you're going to go ahead and tend to do good in is probably taking notes. You're going to be good at organization, maybe, but you struggle with big picture, but you're going to be good at details. So you're good at a lot of the small things. If you're an expressive personality, you're going to be good with energy, excitement, enthusiasm, drive. You can push people, but do it in a fun, funny way. And I already talked about the driver personality. Now, if we go down to the perspective of time, this is very, very important when we're cloning people based on personality. If I can find it here, where is it? Man, there's a lot of stuff in here, right? Okay. Man, I hate when I can't find it. The perspective of time You have the future, you have the past, you have the present. That's what it is. And so when we look at the driver personality here, the driver personality, they're going to be into the future. The analytic is going to be in the past, and then the amiable is going to be in the short term, and the expressive is in the moment. So if we don't understand how other people think based on their personality, we are not going to be able to train them in our unconscious competence. Now, Tim, I don't know if any of this stuff makes sense. What I love having you on podcast is it seems like a lot of times when I'm on podcast, people are like, I have no idea what Mark just said. But you have the ability to kind of translate it. And so hopefully you can bring some insight if people are a little frustrated, they're not sure what's going on. So thoughts, Tim, questions, insights?
So I definitely think that with each of the different personality types, they all have their um own little superpowers.
Yeah.
With being a chameleon personality, I think I get some of the best way to explain it, some of the brute of the personalities. Like I'm getting everybody's like, oh, you're a chameleon personality. You must be getting all the great things from all the personalities. Well, yeah, but our greatest strength is also our greatest weakness. So I'm also getting all the quote unquote bad. Um, so I think it's finding the strengths and the weaknesses within the personalities, and so expressive, fun, exciting, outgoing. That's awesome. That's lovely. But you know, when you're loving, outgoing, full of energy, and it's time to be serious, people aren't used to that switch up. Like me at work yesterday, I'm always trying to make people smile, and I've gotten a couple of people that they're hard eggs to crack. They really are hard eggs to crack, and I notice just the teeniest tiny smile on their face, and I look at them. I'm like, I got you, got you to smile, and then they get a little grin and more of a smile, or sometimes they shut their face down like, you didn't give me a smile. I'm like, oh, I know I did. But then, the same people sometimes are doing something a little stupid, or something stupid in my eyes. It could not be stupid in their eyes. And I have to crack down. I have to be the bad guy. I'm like, hey, just want to let you know to do this. And, the first time you're nice about it because, they're nice to this. They're used to this big popping personality, this nice guy. So you're like, hey, can you just make sure to do this? And, like there's this kid trying to be a nice guy to him. I'm like, hey, take off the straws out of the cups before you pour them in, because I just he noticed me just take out all the straws out of this disgusting container, so he just makes sure he does it, but then he leaves the plastic cup caps on and still tosses them in there. And I just look at him like, I don't want to be um a jerk to this guy, but that was just stupid. Like, I'm like, why would you do that? And I've just I gotta get a little harsh sometimes. And then, different situation, different job. Um, with my analytic, I believe, is I like things done a certain way, right? Um, I like things done a certain way. And so when people are messing up my groove, it really pisses me off. It's like, why are you messing up my groove? How dare you walk into my space and do something different than I'm used to? Okay. So this week, I'm working on these plants, and somebody's cutting the top trellis, and it's in my personal opinion, it's ruining the structural integrity of the plants, and making all these things fall down. And I'm not mad, but I'm pretty frustrated. And so I go up to the guy and I was like, hey, can you show me what you're doing? Because he can harvest. I'm doing one plant at once. I know this is a guy doing two, three plants at once. Um, and so he's like, Tim, let me show you what I'm doing. And I do it, and I have to cut the top trellis to make it easier, which ruins, in my personal opinion, the structural integrity. But when you're doing all those plants at once, it changes it. So I go from one plant to two plants to cutting that down. It takes me, the same amount of time to cut down 1 plant as 2 plants. I'm like, okay, I get it now. Now I want the challenge, because he's like, oh yeah, I do 2. 3 is a little rough. 4 is very, very hard, Tim.
What
Because
Tim is
not only
talking about, let me just put a bookmark so people understand what you're talking about here. What Tim is talking about is in business, the difference between quantity and quality. So there's in business, to succeed in business, you've got to have a certain quantity of work, but that quantity of work also has to have quality. If you like, my personality is a driver analytic, so I want things fast and perfect in that order. Well, what about being fun? Well, if it's fast and perfect, it'll be fun. What about people being happy? You know what is fast and perfect? Perfect and fast, people will be happy. I don't get distracted with what the amiable and the expressive are doing. So what Tim is doing is he's having tension as a chameleon back and forth. He says, I think quality wise, I need to do it this way, but somebody else can do it twice, 2 to 3 times faster. So now what Tim's doing is something that's very unusual for people to do. And so he's not saying that his way is better and trying to convince the other guy to do 1 plant, so what he's doing is he's seeking to learn how that person's doing it. And then now he knows how that person's doing it. So he's got the speed, but what his brain is going through is, how do I get the speed and the quality? And so how do you clone somebody to think like Tim? I think the way you do that is you expose them to Tim or people like Tim. And so I think a lot of people in their, so Tim's in his 20s, early 20s. And so I think a lot of people in their 20s, they have a hard time listening to me. I'm 60. So somebody over 40, probably, somebody in their 20s says, well, you don't understand. And as soon as somebody says you don't understand, then they can't learn anything from them. And so Tim's having this struggle. So I'm tracking his brain, like the synapse. Literally, there's synapses in his brain where he's trying to reverse engineer and go through this. So the real magic is how do you get somebody to think like Tim? Well, what you do is you expose them to people who are like Tim. So you have them watch this video, this podcast. You have them watch this podcast. And Tim's going through this, and I'm tracking him like, yep, got it, yep, understand, yep. But other personalities won't. They're like, I don't understand what Tim's saying. So you break it down based on personalities, and they're like, oh, now they have a visual, now they have a picture. It's not just connecting dots, it's a picture of what's going on. So there's tension. A lot of times what people will do, maybe especially younger, I don't know, not profiling or stereotyping, I'm just saying, that there's frustration. And so a lot of times when people get frustrated, what do? They give up. Well, Tim's not going to give up. Tim's going to say, I look at this frustration, this tension that's going on. Like people say, well, that's stress. Well, that's tension. Well, that's anxiety. So they put a lot of labels on what's happening, and those labels typically have a negative feeling. So they just stop doing that, not realizing, no. The tension is good to go back and forth between those two, but Tim's had to learn how to do it. So sorry to interrupt, Tim, but I don't know if people who are watching, listening to the podcast, I don't know if they'll see what's magical happening in your brain. And if you don't see what's magically happening in Tim's brain, you can't clone it. You can't understand it. So sorry, Tim, go ahead and pick up and keep going.
No worries at all. And so, going from now that I believe that I've mastered the art of 1 to 2 plants, he's done 3, and I was like, man, I did 2, and this is difficult. Well, I was like, you know what? I like difficult. Difficult's good. Let's do 4.
That's another piece. We might do a part 2 on it. Like, is he just strange? Like what? Like most people aren't like, I like difficult. Tim is like, so he's trained his brain to go ahead and see, I like difficult. So rather than, well, I don't like difficult, this is stressful, anxiety, this is pressure, this is all kinds of stuff. Tim's trained his brain to say, I like difficult. And so what he does is he attacks this in a different way. So how do you clone that? You expose people to Tim, then you point it out, flag it out, and say, when you think like this, it will hurt, it will be painful, you'll have anxiety, you'll have stress. But just like the Israeli army, it's like, well, you're going to see some messy stuff and you'll be fine. Like the brain is an amazing instrument. And so you'll be fine. Sorry, Tim. Like every few words, it's like there's magic and I have to stop it to make sure people are paying attention.
So and I'm not, I'm not really doing this to impress anybody. The guy leaves the room. My lead leaves the room. And so I'm like, he's seen me do two. I throw a four on my shoulder. He walks in, and this man has the biggest smile on his face. The biggest smile on his face. I whip up four, and he looks at me, Tim, is that four? And I'm like, yeah, that's four. He's like, I can't even do four, Tim. And I'm like, what? And he's like, did you get the biggest thing is anybody can do multiple plants at once, according to them, but you can't. When you're bringing them up, you can't get dirt on the plants. You have to have the quality, quantity, plus the added quality of you can't mess it. Is people can get four plants, but you have to get it up you have to have the strength to lift it up without letting any dirt get on it. Because if you get dirt on it, it's going to ruin the quality of the plant. You can't get that off. You have to destroy that plant. And so I'm like, oh man, I didn't think about that. I'm like, oh crap, did I get dirt on this? And he looks at me, he's like, no, Tim, it's perfect. You did great. And I'm like, okay, there's a relief there. And he looks at me, he's like, Tim, you did four. That's I've done it sometimes, but sometimes I get dirt on it. Tim, next time you get a chance, you should go six. And I look at him and I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, it's crazy. I can't do it, Tim. But I think you can do it, Tim. And I look at all the bays. I'm like, well, we're done for this week. Well, no, we went on lunch and I came back and I was like, hey, you got me still reaping still? And they're like, no, it's all good. And I wasn't even supposed to reap that day. And since the beginning, when I first started, I hated reaping. And that's what all the new guys ask me. They're like, man, I hate reaping. What do you do to make yourself better at it, Tim? I'm like, you just do it. They're like, what do you mean? That's stupid advice. I'm like, I know. That was the advice I got, and I thought it was stupid too. But when you just do something that you really, really, really don't want to do, you really start to enjoy it. You just start to, if you have to do something, you might as well enjoy having to do it. Because otherwise, every single time that you do it, you're going to sit in your mind, you're going to go through these dark synapses in your brain, and you're going to hate doing it. So you're just going to hate doing it or enjoy doing it. I personally would much rather enjoy doing something because I'm going to have to do it for the rest of my life. Not reaping in general, but other areas. And it was cool. Because later that week, I try to do different things every day. I tell all my people that I talk to, I say, every single day I try to do something that makes me a little uncomfortable.
So what we're going to do is pick that up on the next podcast. Like, how do you learn how to do that? And how do different personalities, because every personality, every one of the four, and then the chameleon personality, every one of them need to do that because it develops new synapses in the brain, but it's hard for every one of them, but for different reasons. So we're going to pick that up on another one. Tim's done a number of different podcasts and a number of different topics. If you have, as a business owner, one of the biggest challenges that we have is in the areas of employees and addictions. I mean, it just, the productivity that it just kills us. And so Tim's battled with some of that on his own and just healing, recovering, learning to think differently, being able to do some crazy cool things. So another great voices of integrity for addictions. There's tons of podcasts he's done there that I think would be very beneficial for you as a business owner and then for your employees as well. If you have any questions on anything we covered today, connect with the individual who invited you to participate, or you can call toll free 888-230-2300 outside the US 630-393 9909. And always remember, we can accomplish so much more together than we ever could on our own. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye.